So welcome to Precision Golf. We're going to do a video today, and it's the phrase we get asked most often, be it in the coaching bay or the fitting bay: is it me or the clubs?
Yeah, it happens all the time, and it's a really difficult question to answer, isn't it, really? I think sometimes you can try and make so much work with your swing and try and make so much progress, but actually, if it's difficult to change, it could just be that the clubs fit incorrectly, and that could be the easy fix.
Yeah, and really, you know, the combination of the two is the answer to getting maximum out, but you know, it's that age-old thing. You know, is it the swing, or is it the club setup? Is it something I can do to fix it, or do I need to come and buy some new equipment? Yeah, we see both sides of the line. So, which fix are we starting with today?
I think getting stuck during the downswing is such a common fault, and we'll come onto it later. But when I had my first fit with you when I first came here, that was exactly the problem I had. And a change in weight of shaft was literally all I needed to go from outwards of 70 yards wide dispersion probably to then 10 yards, not consistently, but 3 shots and 3 shots. It made such a difference. So I think working on technique to get less stuck is good, but maybe if the shaft is too heavy, you can talk more about that, but that can just make matters worse and even harder to fix with technique.
Right, so technique first, I think.
Yeah,
I think.
Fine.
So let's look at, and I'll grab your 8-iron.
Okay, yeah. Excellent.
So we have a beautiful looking club for a beautiful looking man.
Stop it.
But a Dynamic Gold Taurus UX100, big old setup, this one. So, but it's something that, you know, I grew up learning to play with cut down ones of these.
Yeah.
So it might seem like an odd setup to go to, but this is what a lot of juniors in their time growing up, maybe less so now with some of the junior clubs that are out there.
Yeah.
We learned to play with stuff like this, where they just trimmed them down and off you go and crack on.
Yeah. And now with juniors who might not be, you know, as strong, they're super mobile, but sometimes a lot of them don't have a lot of stability at the same time. You know, getting the right shaft for them is pretty crucial. And so many juniors get stuck on the inside because inevitably the club swings them rather than they swing the club. And I think when you get taller, stronger, it's easier to manage the weight of the club, but the weight of the club is just epically important.
So
you never get stuck, do you, Simon?
So my failing technique-wise, historically, when I learnt to play, it was all drive the legs and then hit with the hands. So it was that classic kind of lateral move off it and then slide back onto it, and then dropped in. But for me, my save is that way. So the hook has always been my nemesis. Absolute nemesis. Which I'm better at now than I ever used to be. But it is that element of you go and the club doesn't come with, or the right side drops underneath. Yeah,
which a lot of the time can stem from, even you can take those problems back to setup a lot of the time. People might be in more fade bias positions in setup, and then they try and draw it, which can cause a lot of slide of the pelvis, you know, a lot of lateral force through the ground, but not a whole ton of rotational force.
As you can say, the draw, that bit, I mean, now a lot of the top players are playing fades, whereas, you know, not that long ago, the draw is the good player's shot. So everyone aspired to this pretty right to left shot. So hence you see people trying to get the club on the inside and work on an into out path and hitting that bit of a draw and then creating that underneath position that we see so often.
Yeah. For me, if you've got to work really hard to hit the draw, it's probably because your setup, backswing or top of the backswing are in fade bias positions. Does that make sense? Whereas people who draw it and they have a consistency to the draw, and in my book, I don't really feel, you know, a fade, if you miss it right, it lands a bit softer. A draw, if you overturn a draw and if you have the hooks, that's obviously quite a damaging miss. But if you can control these kind of pull, fade, push, draw ball flights, I'm not convinced one is particularly safer than the other if you've got them both dialed in.
But I think you'd see one on tour if that was the case, but you do see both.
Yeah, definitely. But I think, if you've got to work hard to hit the draw, it's probably not your natural shape.
So I'm going to do a couple of swings with this. And I'm using this one because it's a strong setup, and it's what a lot of players going back if you've had equipment for a while. Maybe not the Tour issue model, but the dynamic gold is a shaft that a lot of players would have. And I'm not going to go full tilt at it, but just put something on, and you can let me know what you see. So I'm going to maybe try and play a little bit more of that draw feel, because that's one of the symptoms that's going to lead to getting a little bit stuck.
Yeah. Ladies and gents, he's just delivered a 1.6 path. Super.
Still from the inside.
What's your usual path? It's pretty neutral, isn't
it?
Very
Neutral. Yeah, very neutral. Yeah. And it's actually quite interesting. I'll talk about it more once you've done your swing bits, but what I can feel this club doing to my action.
Yeah, so you get it in such a neutral spot at the top. The first one you hit, you had a 1 degree path, and I think 3 or 4 down on the ball. The last couple, it just looks like you've had to work harder to move it from the inside. Okay. And have lost a little bit of downstrike as a result of that.
Right.
So you don't get it in a particularly draw bias position, but equally you're not in a super fade bias position. Yeah. So it's not like you have, tons of depth at the top, or equally not a lot of depth. You have the left arm in a super spot, covers the left shoulder, right shoulder nicely, and it comes through neutral. So when you had to try and draw it, usually when you look at people's feet working, you move your pressure more towards the left toe, which would help you effectively get the club more behind you.
Yep.
But then because you're busy doing that, you've unloaded the club, and that second one was just a little bit scuffy, a little bit left.
Yeah.
But you can just see how you've had to manipulate the way you use your lower half to get the club to drop on the inside.
Okay.
Which is a tricky way for the average person, not necessarily you, but for the average person to do that and also keep downstrike is quite difficult.
What it does, I can certainly feel myself getting. I can feel the clubs dropping. I can feel myself going back to that position. I know with my own clubs that are, I think shaft weight, they're about 15, 16 grams lighter than this.
Yeah.
That allows me to stay there and get the club back out.
Yeah.
With these, I feel, for those that remember Tom Lehman, I feel like I'm kind of getting into there and having to drag the club through.
Exactly.
And we all know what that can lead to, which is the good old hosel rocket, which I thankfully I'm not too averse to, or don't do very often. But certainly, as you say, having to work hard to get that club through. So the heavy club actually helps to drop it in more.
Yeah.
But if I do one more, it doesn't feel like, it feels like I've got to work very, very hard to get that back out in front of me.
Yeah, which I think for someone who swings it so neutral, that's fine. But if you are, I think one of the most common reasons why people get stuck, outside of where I was with the heavy shaft of my driver, honestly, people get in a backswing that doesn't want to draw it, and they start their downswing almost tipping the shaft into a steeper spot, and then have to early extend for their life to get the club on the inside. Whereas sometimes it's like you can fix early extension and getting stuck by actually sometimes getting into more of a draw bias backswing. So you don't have to, you've had to feel a lot of slide, you've had to really move your weight across excessively to give yourself that path. Whereas some people might get it in there because they're just trying for their life to draw it.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people would say, well, if I'm like that shot, that delivery that I have could lead to an overdraw.
Correct.
Or the drop kick to the bottom out.
Absolutely.
I'd feel like I've got to get more out to in, get the club out in front of it a little bit more in order to play a fade from that would be quite hard work.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I've got to get the handle leading, and if there's a lot of mass there, that's something that takes an awful lot of pull to get that down and keep it going. So if I were to try and do that,
I've got to work a lot harder.
I can't control my body doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, I've hit it, but that's not repeatable.
No.
And that's taken a heck of a lot of yardage off as well.
It's, again, you've had to almost kind of over-control the swing of the golf club. That makes sense? So it's almost like arm wrestling someone in your weight class then versus going up a weight class. Like moving it can be so difficult and feel as if it takes much effort. Whereas if you were to blend the technical change with a good club change, shaft, head, whatever, you can equally feel as if you've got two things which are wanting to have the same outcome, rather than, like you said, excessive early extension. It's pretty difficult to fade it from it. Whereas if you're trying to fade it when you're early extending, it's like you've got two things which want to do two different outcomes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas when you get the club and the technique in the right place, it feels easier, definitely.
And I think that's something in the fitting bay we see. Someone who's struggling to get their body cleared out the way and get stuck and get kind of blocked.
Yeah.
Often comes from exactly this. Trying to keep. If the club gets behind, that slides forward. Well, I can't keep rotating from there.
Yeah.
So hence get to there, and then it goes that way.
Yeah.
And then comes that rotation. Whereas, case in point, I'll now get mine.
Look out.
Which one would hope was a little bit better set up. But taking all that weight out the shaft, I can actually start to let the club just drop into place. Absolutely. Which then means that I'm not having to pull on it, which means that doesn't get blocked, which means I can just turn out the way and stay so much more in balance.
It's just way easier for you to control the mass of the club. Way easier. Like you could just see that one was just much more halfway down that golf club, because obviously when you look at swing plane and things, TrackMan measures swing plane below knee high, doesn't it? Things like that. It's quite low down, so it doesn't really care where you're at the top.
Yeah.
But what really matters is where do you get the club from, parallel to the ground into strike, and that one was just way more in front of you, as opposed to the other ones where you're trying to hit the drawer like this, and then you've got so much work to do, square in the face, finding strike, applying speed, in like no time whatsoever. Which is why it can be great, or you could duff it, block it, hook it, anything you like really.
And as you said there's so much going on at impact, and I think obviously we're discussing both sides of the line here, whether, what do clubs do and obviously the swing technique. From a club point of view, getting the club set up allows, the more stable you can keep your frame, the more in posture, fewer moving parts, the easier it is to deliver that club consistently, so get quality of contact. I think that's what we see most from well set up clubs. The swing, if you're 8 degrees out to in a 5 degrees open, you're hitting a fade, be you left hand or right, you're hitting a fade shot. And there's nothing the club can do to stop that if that's your pattern. And then it's lessons to change that technique. But if you're battling something particularly heavy, every now and then the stars will align, you'll absolutely nuke one. But it's going to be kind of all or nothing kind of setup. Whereas the better the setup and the more stable I am, I can just put it on repeat. I can just turn through and hit the same shot over and over again. Because the club's allowing me to functionally move properly.
Suits your strength and swing speed and posture.
Or lack of. But
I think it's just with the getting stuck in, getting too flat in swing plane. Do you think you could also go too light, and therefore that might cause some steepness? Because a lot of the time people can't really feel into the weight of the club. So, people might get a shaft that's too heavy, or a head that's too heavy, mainly a shaft.
It can do,
and that would cause the club to lower, because obviously this club isn't just moving with gravity, but we're also applying some forces to the handle. So too heavy can get stuck, but equally too light, people just can't really feel the head of the club.
Absolutely,
And I would imagine that would cause more steepness, because you can't really feel the head load up your hands and grip. And if it's on top and it feels light on the way down, that could cause the complete opposite shot. So it could cause over the top and a big slice.
Too light, you haven't got anything to build speed with. So it's equal opposite forces. Ultimately, you want the amount of energy required to move the club to match the energy going in. And then the club stays more in that player's plane, whatever the plane that is. Can be very neutral, or can be shallow or steep. But it's matching, so it's tracking down that neutral line. If you go light, then you don't necessarily throw it, but what will happen is loss of the club head control. So you almost get halfway down and you almost through the shot before you get to the ball. So you have to back off of it to get control. Rather than heavy, you've got to then hulk up and give it a heave. So, and either way, you're losing that consistency of club face of contact ultimately.
Yeah, exactly.
So to summarise overall, I think you take the swing fault or the fixer getting stuck. Both sides, technique, quite clearly, technique and clubs are going to have an impact on that, and this is where the mass of the club has a huge bearing. From a club fitting point of view, I think the question is, at what point would I hand someone over to Lewis or Stuart to weave their magic on someone? I think when the weight of the club and the clubs are set up well, your strike's going to be pretty consistent. I think that's the key thing. The swing lines can be wherever they're going to be, but the quality of contact is going to be there. And at that point, and the player actually looks balanced making their move rather than having to throw themselves at it. Then it's a technique thing.
I think as long as you have a good awareness of where the club head is, that's usually a good way to find strike. Do you know what I mean? Whether it gets too light or too heavy and you can't feel it, or it's controlling you. If you can't find strike in a lesson, even though you've got certain aspects of your swing which should find strike, then maybe it's heaviness of the shaft or lightness of the shaft, definitely. But it's like hammering a nail, right? If you've got the heavy end of the hammer and the nail, it's quite easy to join it. If you've got a really light hammer, it might be more difficult to find the nail.
It's like trying to hit the ball with the grip end of the club.
Exactly.
Almost impossible.
Yeah,
Almost
exactly.
impossible.
Yeah, exactly that.
So essentially, there's both aspects. So it's an element of 1 + 1 = 3. The two sides working together really give your best chance of playing your best golf. Clearly technique. The world's best players are always working on their technique, and not enough of us amateurs do that. In my opinion, we see it in the fitting bays. There are golfers that could benefit massively from working on technique, but equally speaking, working on technique with a horribly unsuitable implement, club-wise, then renders that ineffectual.
And you could be doing more harm than good. With what you're saying about how heavy the shaft can get and how hard you have to work, it might be throwing other aspects off.
So, if we've learned anything from that, it's have a look at both. I think ultimately, if your strike's good, seek lessons. If your strike's inconsistent and you struggle, you have kind of standout great shots and then a load of miss hits.
Yeah, if the strike is scattered. Low point control is a bit different. But if the strike's scattered all over the face, there's no consistency to what side of the face you hit it on. Definitely.
Get a look at your clubs. So I hope that's given you some good insights into both the swing and the equipment side. We'll be doing a series on these, so there'll be more videos to follow on. If you like this, take a look at the rest of the videos on the channel. We've got one of Lewis's fitting, or kind of a brief intro with his driver that covers this subject perfectly. And have a look at Lewis's channel, Stuart's, ours. Enjoy the content, and we'll see you again soon.
See you soon.